commonlawyer.com, and we're here today with two former state legislators from Montana and two present legislators from Montana. And they're talking about a problem that faces every state now with the Trump administration making changes. And what are the state legislatures going to do with Medicare and Medicaid? But we're talking more, I think, about Medicaid. But I appreciate that distinction. I don't think most people think of it. It was made in the last presentation. But we're going to continue. This is a common lawyer comments, but this is specifically in church. And myself, Montana Dan are here, former state legislator, with three others. And we'll continue our discussion where we left off in the last presentation. Go ahead, Dan.
Okay, we have Rick Jor. He was a former legislator back before my time, and then I was a 90-day wonder. And now we also have Representative Gillette and Representative Schillinger, and they're both, I think this is your third term that you've been there, so thank you for what you've done. I guess the elephant in the room question is well, when I was in the legislature, we had a bill reader, and he was from your area, Jerry. He would often say, "Whose money? Who pays?" And so maybe I'll start with Representative Gillette. With in light of what's happening with our federal government and tightening up on spending, what are you seeing coming down the road with our money? It seems like our governor is fairly attuned to balancing the budget, whether the can's kicked down the road or not. But could you comment on that?
Just to clarify, you're asking about the possible federal actions and how it might impact the state?
Well, both our general government, the federal government, and the state relying on so much money that's maybe not going to be there in the future, and maybe near future.
Well, I wish that was the case. I mean, I wish that the federal government would tighten spending, which would in return require states to tighten spending. I'm not sure that people like us are going to get that kind of impact that we are hoping for. It seems like politically a very heavy lift for me. Like if not for me, but it just seems like that to me, that it would be a pretty politically heavy lift. Like if I was someone who was in Congress, kind of like was mentioned with, I think it was North Dakota, that it just seems like, the pigs at the trough are going to come, and they are going to petition their members in Congress to not cut their funding. And they'll put so much pressure on them. I think it will be very difficult for members of Congress to resist that. So I'm not super optimistic that it's going to change much, and I 100% support President Trump in at least trying. I'm just not optimistic that our members in Congress can resist it.
Representative Schillinger, any comment?
Yeah, you're on that end. What I'm hearing is getting fairly garbled, both what Jane just said and what you just said. But I'll go ahead and one of the things that the last couple of days from on the national level in regards to the big beautiful bill is in regards to, say, Medicaid, for instance, that perhaps rather than make any sweeping changes, they might try and push a little bit more of the cost of that back to the states. And so the matches could change, the percentages, which will then force us at the state level to make some decisions. And are we going to ask our taxpayers for more? Hopefully not. or are we going to cut back on the spending? And hopefully, with that idea coming from the federal government, it will also include some flexibility in what we have to provide if we're going to continue to get those funds. So it's going to be real interesting to see what plays out, but as I think Jane was alluding to there a bit ago, I'm not very optimistic that we're going to see anything very dramatic come out of this bill other than bigger, more deficits and kicking the can down the road. So I don't think it paints a very rosy scenario right now, at least, and maybe someone will have a revelation and try and create some sense out of the whole thing.
Okay, thank you. Rick, I asked the question if Medicare or Medicaid should be something that the government does, and you had a really short answer, no. But how should that be handled in a as our founders intended? Is that a fair question, Rick?
I love responding to these kind of questions. I appreciate it. And I first would like to say I can understand entirely why both Jane and Jerry expressed that they're not real optimistic that we're going to get where we need to go, because I would suggest that the reason is we've reached that very dangerous point in a society where net tax consumers control public policy rather than net taxpayers, if you will. In other words, those that are living out of the public treasury actually have the political power to determine who gets elected and how the public treasury is going to be spent. It's a dangerous place to be, and I think we're there. I can't help but mention Frederick Bastier's point regarding that when he talked about the concept of false philanthropy and legal plunder. We've actually gotten to the point where we want the legal plunder that government can provide, and we do it under the guise of a claimed philanthropy or charity, but it's actually a false philanthropy. There's nothing philanthropic about stealing through the force of law from not only your neighbors, but your unborn posterity. And one time, Brent, you said this one time, and I've never heard anybody else say it, and I think it ties in here. You mentioned there is gold to be found in poor people.
Yeah. The poor people are a gold mine. I forget who famous said that back in history, but it wasn't me. That's a quote, and he who never quotes is never quoted. So you can quote me, but I'm quoting somebody else.
Yeah, I really honestly believe it, and this is what's driving this excessive spending that is actually probably going to bring us to our knees economically. I mentioned Theodore Forsman before. He wrote a wonderful classic essay called "The Paradox of the Statist Businessman," and if you haven't read it, I encourage you to read it. It's 30 years old now, but this is what businessmen have learned, how to utilize poor people basically as pawns. And both Jane and Jerry were talking about, in answering my previous question, how the real beneficiaries of Medicaid expansion and other welfare state programs are the bureaucrats that get the high-paying jobs to administer the programs, and the politicians that get to then buy their votes out of the public treasury, and the businessmen that, as Jane pointed out very clearly, become subsidized. In that essay, Forsman points out that the statist businessman, and this is paradoxical, has came to terms with the redistributive powers of government, and now his only concern is that he gets his fair share. and a tragic place to be. But anyway, then to your question, Dan, in a just society where legal plunder is not tolerated, the notions of philanthropy and charity and compassion are to be fulfilled within the family and by the family, and then secondarily to the churches. I've not found any biblical sanction where God has delegated the authority of charity to the civil magistrate. Jane said it just a bit ago, government doesn't have anything to give to anybody until it first takes it from someone else. And these are fundamental lessons that we need to relearn. Unfortunately, the price that we're going to pay or are paying is tragic for rejecting those fundamental principles of true charity and true compassion.
Thank you, Rick. I talked with Representative Gillette before the call, and then also heard Representative Schillinger say that he's involved in a local medical facility. And then Rick just said that through charity and other ways, we can help meet this need a little better, and maybe that is something we need to talk about more. But Representative Gillette or Representative Schillinger, do you have any comments on that? And I do appreciate your willingness to serve us in the state legislature. I can't imagine the session you went through, but any comments from either one of you?
I'm not sure exactly what you're asking there, but in the conversation that we just had and the comment about poor people being a gold mine, it brought up some thoughts in my mind along that line. And what we've seen, just some tiny peaks so far on the federal level, one being the USAID. Well, most of that, supposedly, we're led to believe that it is foreign aid for poor people, and when that was shut down or put a temporary hold on, people were going to die, people were going to, suffer, et cetera, overseas. But what we've seen pretty blatantly, just related to that agency, is that more than anything, it's a money laundering organization, a money laundering operation. And much of the money that we've wondered about in elections in the past, where so much opposition money comes to beat us over the head with. Well, come to find out, obviously, it's come through these money laundering operations that the Congress and the administrations appropriate and send money through these organizations, that a lot of it gets funneled back into nonprofits and political organizations that then come to elect more people that create more of that kind of funding. And that's on the federal level, but as Jane has seen, well, as each of you on the panel here, Dan and Rick have seen too in the legislature, we have that right in Montana too. And when you look at Medicaid expansion, you mentioned the chamber, the money that they spent and the influence they put in on it, it's because that money comes back to them as a corporate welfare or to their members. But another big one that we see that we deal with all the time as conservatives is Montana Hospital Association. Same thing. Big lobby efforts, big political action committees that come in and support those big government Republicans and Democrats that'll continue to put money in their bucket. And I think it was, I forget just what the comments were a little bit earlier too that triggered me to jot down a couple other things that we institutionalize. If the governor signs the bill, I think that one's still out. Is it 924? I think, Jane, the big boat, the big trust bill that Representative Jones pushed through, and we institutionalized.
I call it the Death Star.
Yeah, we institutionalized another entitlement of daycare. So that's been put into. We put a lot of money into daycare every session anyway, and now that's been put into this trust. And why was that? Well, to buy the Democrat votes, because they knew they couldn't get the conservative votes, so they bought the Democrat votes, or as Representative Jones likes to refer to as, he had to buy left because he just couldn't get the Republican votes to pass his big government bill there. Same thing with low-income housing or workforce housing, whatever they want to call it. So there's another portion in the trust for that. So it's, I guess these things all come back to the same thing: institutionalizing government, institutionalizing dependencies, and as Rick mentioned, it's created a political, what would you say, a political wall for a lot of elected people that they're not going to fight against. Jane, take it from there.
Yeah. I mean, I would agree that government has taken over the role of what we would consider as philanthropy, right? Like we have one whole bill that passed successfully, of course, that is dedicated to providing taxpayer dollars to fund everything from the ballet, museums, acting guilds, like the arts. It just seems like that's not the role of government. It's great if you want to do those things. I support those things individually. But to have government be doing that does not seem, at least constitutionally, as the role of government. Related, we had a bill, which we've seen many times before, and I'm always vehemently opposed to, which increases the tax credits to the film industry. In this session, they wanted to move it from $12 million to $30 million. And as you knock on doors through Montana, and I'm sure actually the rest of the nation, I mean, people are really concerned about their property taxes. And to think that legislators, and they were for the most part, except for individuals like Representative Schillinger and me, for the most part, legislators were in favor of moving that bill forward that would provide $30 million in tax credits to the film industry. So it doesn't make sense. Like, that's not what the voters want. I think that if the voters understood that that's what was going on, they would be very dismayed. Another example of that is it successfully passed $4 million for the renovation of pools. $4 million for the renovation of pools. And yet for very vital services related to people with severe mental disabilities and the very poor elderly and suicide, we only spend $1.5 million. Like, how can we make that right in our minds? I think our priorities, I don't mean Representative Schillinger and myself, but I think in general within the legislature of Democrats and big government Republicans, I think the priorities are very off.
Go ahead, Rick.
Yeah.
My hearing's not good. The renovation of pools, did you say? Like swimming?
Yes. Swimming pools, $4 million. It was a bill that passed the Democrat sponsored and big government Republican supported. $4 million for the renovation, not the building. I mean, not that that would matter in my mind, but the renovation of existing pools, whether it's Billings or Havre or Missoula. And yet again, we spend $1.5 million on things like suicide prevention. It just seems like it's not right. Like, we have no business renovating pools. We could probably argue that we have an obligation to public safety and people who are, severely mentally disabled. I think we could probably make that argument. But pools, I can't get behind that. But that passed. So it's sad.
Not to make it worse, Jane, but it was $5 million, not $4 million.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for correcting me. Oh my gosh. so
sure,
bad.
Senator Dirksen said $1 million here, $1 billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about some money. Well, I don't even make a distinction. Once we get up to $1 billion, $1 trillion, it's all the same to me because nobody could ever pay it anyway. But I'm not on the inside. I recognize that inflation has driven us to say those kind of things because money's not worth anything. But appreciate your comments about it. Montana Dan, have you got any more questions? I don't want to.
Well, I really appreciate everybody joining us today, and I think it's something we should continue talking about. With my past experience, it seems like in a large part of Montana, the grassroots is getting real weary of big government, anti-liberty type stuff. So if we could maybe each take a little short jab at that, and then I think we'll have to close. So Representative Gillette, if you'd like to start on that, if you're willing.
Sure. I mean, I think it all belongs and starts with our grassroots constituents, right? Like, that's the people who elected us. Those are the individuals who we are responsible to. I think at the end of the day, even Democrats, honestly, and big government Republicans still agree on some of those principles of limited government, smaller government, less spending. I do think that they genuinely agree, maybe to different degrees, but I do think that there is some overlapping interest in that and caring for that topic. But, I think maybe it's just because I'm in this world, or it's a really highly politicized environment right now, but I do think the public is very wary of the gamesmanship and it's everything they hate about politics is going on right now. I think they're exhausted by it. And we can control our own actions. Of course, we can't control other people's actions, but to the extent that we can control our own actions, I think we should not participate in that gamesmanship. We should take the higher road, say what we mean, do what we say, and take the higher road with respect to freedoms and limited government.
Thank you. I know your county chair is very involved in local, so thank you. Representative Schellinger.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. I think a lot of the challenges we face is what Rick alluded to earlier, in that the dependencies that have been created and the perceived dependencies. I look at my rural area that I live in here, and the infrastructure that was built and everything was basically created from the prairie. So everything that we have today, and of course there were some things that were aided by the government, but by and large in my granddad's, my dad's generation, they didn't wait for government to come and do things. When things needed to be done, they went and did it. They went and built it, created them. And we have created this dependency attitude anymore that Jane mentioned, this bill that I think it ended up dying in the Senate, actually, that swimming pool bill, but this whole idea that the state government has to come and fund the renovations and improvements to local swimming pools. That perception has pervaded our society that we can't do anything anymore without a grant from somewhere to do things that, if they're a local priority, that we should be doing ourselves. And then I'll digress a little bit, I guess, but get into a whole other area that I talked about a lot during the session, or quite a bit, is the reason that we're seeing more and more welfare state type programs is because of, in Montana especially, specifically, we've destroyed so many of our wealth creating industries, timber, ag, mining, oil and gas, that provided a lot of great jobs that people could earn money at to buy their own homes, provide their own daycare, their own health care, etc. And so it's a process. When we talk to people individually out here, we have a real sense of, they have a real sense of independence and want government off their backs. But when it comes to turning down these kind of giveaway programs, they're a little more hesitant about that. It's kind of like you've always heard that people have such a low opinion of Congress, but they love their own congressman. And so I don't know how we totally turn that ship around, but hopefully the big, beautiful bill, they start to do that by cutting back some of these government programs that prolong these dependencies. And just, I guess, to digress one more time, back to Medicaid, and Jane alluded to it, how much better of a insurance it is than a lot of what private people have. And I would just mention that a zero deductible, so zero copay, essentially.
Right.
People can go in and utilize, and what that does is create an overutilization. People go in for a runny nose, anything that might be bothering them a little bit, and that creates an overutilization of that service, and then it deprives people in the private sector, the private pay sector, of the kind of service that they could normally expect, and drive up the cost of that too. So anyway, a long rambling answer, but we have a big task ahead of us.
Thank you. Rick, you probably won't have much to say on this one, but go for it. And I'm just kidding.
I really appreciate what both Jerry and Jane just conveyed, because I think what they're conveying is self-government, what was historically understood as self-government in this country. In other words, you are responsible for yourself, and that's what we need more of. We need less civil government and more self-government. And I'll just say this, Edmund Burke said it really well in my view. He said, men are qualified for civil liberty in exact proportion to their willingness to place chains upon their moral appetite. The less there is within, the more there must be from without. And he said, it is written in the constitution of things that men of intemperate minds can never be free. Their passions forge their fetters. And these passions of envy and covetousness that have culminated in the welfare state is what's driving our destruction, I'll say.
Again, I want to thank all of you for coming. Brent, thanks for letting us do this. And it was touched on quite a few times, and with my conversation earlier with Representative Gillette, there are other ways to help with this, and we have to be a little more self-reliant. There was talk that Medicaid insurance is super good, but if you're living a healthy lifestyle and trying to take care of your own needs, we can do it better ourselves if we'll learn and just get out and do something. I want to put a little plug in for Brent. His website is commonlawyer.com. Brent has a lot of information on a lot of different topics, how to take care of yourself in the legal system, our proper relationship with God. I appreciate all those things. So check out Brent's website, commonlawyer.com. And thank you, Representative Gillette and Representative Schillinger and former Representative Rick Jor for coming with us. Maybe we can do it again some other time, or if you have any feedback, by all means, we got contact information now. So the grassroots is important. Thank you again. And Brent, you have a parting word?
Oh, I suppose I do. I got a lot of them, but I'll try to limit myself. If there is no force outside of the governments of men and men themselves, there will be no limits on the activities of men. And we have that force, and it's governed our nation, whether we understand it, acknowledge it or not. And it's more important what goes on in your house than what goes on in the White House, the State House, or the courthouse, as important as that is. The power of America is what goes on in your house. And we appreciate these folk coming on. They're in the middle of the storm. They're in the midst of the battle. They're living there. It is dangerous, whether outsiders acknowledge it or not, and we appreciate the efforts they make and the comments that have been made here. Thank you, Montana Dan. And maybe we can get them to come back. I didn't want to wear them out they talked a long time, Dan, and were willing to, they were willing to put up, and I know their time is valuable. Well, all of us, if you're thinking right, you're trying to make a living, but they were kind enough to come on and talk with us. We appreciate it.